Welcome to Don't Retire, Graduate, the podcast that teaches you how to advance into retirement rather than retreating. I'm your host and valedictorian, Eric Brotman, and today's guest is Holly Morphew. Holly's a visionary, financial coach, and multi-generational entrepreneur. She's the founder and CEO of Financial Impact, which helps professionals and entrepreneurs create personal wealth and financial independence. A pioneer in the personal finance industry, Holly's work's been featured in Forbes, Business Insider, Yahoo Finance, Femme Founder, and more. And her own journey in eliminating $67,000 worth of debt in her 20s, reaching financial independence in her 30s, and overcoming chronic illness are what inspire her to help others realize their dreams too. I met Holly at the FinCon meeting in Austin, Texas this year, and she's a superstar. I know our audience is going to love her. Holly, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Eric. I'm so excited to be here.
This is really fun. First of all, it was so nice getting to talk to you at an actual conference that we actually went to personally and physically after like a year and a half of feeling like it was a fully remote world. Tell our audience a little bit about your path, your journey, because it sounds like there's been, it sounds like a circuitous route to getting where you were. And so tell us about that.
Oh my goodness. Yes, it really has been. Like I always say that wealth is such a journey and life is an ebb and a flow, and there's no such thing as perfection when it comes to wealth building. And my journey is definitely exemplary of that. And, you know, I grew up in a family that talked about money at the dinner table. So it's always been a fun and comfortable topic for me, like if not creative. Like, you know, my mom is a real estate investor. Her parents were real estate investors. My dad's an entrepreneur. His dad was an entrepreneur. So it's in my blood, and, you know, money and business and financial independence to me is just, it's something that it can be super expansive. And it's also something that I think a lot of people are really aspiring to. And you know, I bought my first house when I was 25, and that was really empowering for me because, you know, I was able to get a roommate. A friend of mine moved in and I charged her super cheap rent, and she helped me pay my mortgage, and it was really this win-win experience. And so I started asking the question, well, why am I the only one of my friends who is having this experience, you know, who's bought a house, and it made me feel very secure and safe. And I realized, okay, it's because a lot of my friends at that time, this is like the mid 2000s, didn't grow up in a family where they talked about credit and debt and, you know, the importance of savings and how to buy a house. And so as I looked around and realized that many of my peers were either living at home or living in apartments or really struggling with their money, going into debt, or, you know, had, you know, not a great credit score just because they weren't educated, I realized, okay, it's because we're not teaching this stuff. And so at the time I was a member of Rotary International, which is an international service organization. And I went to my club, to my board members, and I proposed this service project. I said, you know, why don't I go to local high schools and teach young adults who are getting ready to graduate and go into the real world how to manage their money so that they can get started on the right foot like I was able to, versus making a lot of the mistakes that can take many years to undo. And they love the idea. So I went ahead and started teaching this workshop, and it was a total success. I was taking time off of my full-time job to teach this little money workshop to young adults. And then after a little while, I had teachers and parents of my students calling me up and saying, hey, Holly, can I sit in on your workshop? And I thought, you know, this is interesting. And I realized it's not just young adults that want to learn about money. Everyone is thirsty for financial education, all ages. And now, you know, today, fast forward many years later, as a financial coach myself, everything that I do is about meeting my clients where they are. I call it just-in-time financial planning. So that's how I began, you know, teaching personal finance.
As soon as you said that you grew up in a family where you talked about money at the dinner table, I think one of my eyebrows went up in a very peculiar way, kind of like a confused dog, right? I was like, wait, there are families that talk about that at the dinner table? Because so many don't talk. It's taboo. People don't talk about their net worth or even what's important about money. and there's no education out there. So the fact that you created this content 13 years or so ago is amazing. And so when you started teaching these workshops, this was a community service project. This was a volunteerism, correct?
Yes.
And are you still teaching in the traditional sense now, or are you doing purely one-on-one coaching?
I actually donate 10 to 20% of my time through my company Financial Impact to service organizations, libraries, local schools, and local charity organizations to help people learn about money. And yes, I do one-on-one coaching today. I also do small group coaching programs, masterminds, and lots of other fun wealth and abundance related things. And a big piece of my story that I didn't quite get to, just kind of going back to, the journey of creating wealth and how life, sometimes everything is going great. We're able to invest and save. And sometimes it's not, because we get laid off or we get sick. That was my experience. And so, my journey hasn't been perfect at all. As a matter of fact, even though I had bought this house, in my 20s and things on the outside looked like they were going really well for me, I also had a lot of debt myself as a result of when I was 20, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness. And my medication was $5,000 a month. And after I graduated from college and moved to the East Coast, got my first job, I got sick again, and my insurance didn't cover my expensive medication. And so for 6 months, I charged my medicine on my credit cards. And for a long time, even, leading up to and after I bought my house, I was doing what I call mental accounting, where I had an idea of what was coming in and an idea of what was going out in terms of my cash flow, but I hadn't actually written it down. And I was very much like not wanting to face it. And it wasn't until, at this point, I was probably in my mid to late 20s. I had a great job working in real estate, working for a Fortune 500 company. And my office was 40 miles from my house, and I drove a Honda Accord. And we had 3 back-to-back snowstorms in Colorado, and literally our whole state was shut down except my offices were open. And I called my boss and I said, I think it's a risk for me to get on the highways and come into work. And she said, if you don't come in, you're fired. And I thought, what would happen if I didn't come into work? And I realized I was very much living paycheck to paycheck. Like I was always waiting for my paycheck to come in so that I could pay my bills. And that was the moment when I realized, okay, I've done all the things that society teaches us to do. I went to school, got good grades, got the job, bought the house. But here I am, if I don't go to work and risk my life to go to this job so that I can get my paycheck, I'm literally going to lose it all. And am I really successful? And I realized in that moment, I wasn't. I just had a lot of debt. And so I did make it to work and home safe that day. And when I got home, I added up my credit card debt, and I found out that I had $67,000 of credit card debt.
Wow. That's a lot of credit cards, Holly.
Yes.
But in fairness, one of the biggest causes, I think, of bankruptcies is, in fact, medical expenses and prescription expenses. So it's not rare that someone can run up, life-changing debt over an illness. That is, I think, a frequent occurrence in this country.
Absolutely, it is. I mean, we have the data to back it up, and that's why having health insurance is so crucial. And that experience is what really motivated me to continue to teach personal finance, because, taking time off work to teach was becoming more difficult for me. And so after that experience, I did call my financial advisor and I said, hey, I need some help. Like, how do I get out of this situation? I'm working, 60, 70-hour weeks. I cannot work anymore. And he asked me, well, how much more money do you want to invest? Now, not all financial planners and advisors are created equally. Many, like you, want to really go deep and help, let's see how we can get you to where you want to go. But that was his solution. And so just from that moment, I thought, I'm going to learn everything that I can about debt elimination, wealth management, personal finance, investing, and I devoted my life to that. And 3 years later, I just applied everything that I learned to my personal finances. And 3 years later, I was totally debt free. And shortly after that, I had money in the bank. And then in my 30s, I became financially independent. And then a year after that, I became a millionaire. And so that whole experience made me realize that money really is simple. It's just a matter of being consistent and showing up for yourself and learning like what to do first. And having health insurance is absolutely crucial.
Well, simple is a loaded term when talking about money, and I know it's also the title of your book, Simple Wealth. So tell us a little bit about that. First of all, congratulations on the book. You are a best-selling author. I am an author, not a best-selling author. So you clearly did something right. You struck a nerve and hit it in an amazing, have an amazing success with your book. So tell us more about that.
Thanks so much, Eric. And by the way, I have read your book and it is fantastic. It is like a Bible for me. It's on my bookshelf and it's just so robust and it's almost like an encyclopedia, like everything that you need to know. So kudos to you too. You know, writing a book is a big deal. And you know, I think the reason that my book became a bestseller in, you know, lots of different categories from, you know, women in business to personal transformation, credit repair, real estate, personal finance, wealth management, etc., I think is because, like I said, it's not just the strategy. You know, I always say wealth building is only 20% strategy and 80% mindset. So woven into my book is the habits and practices that transform you into a wealthy person, which are the same things that, you know, when you were reading my bio earlier, you know, I also, through this process of becoming the person, you know, becoming the wealthy person, it had these secondary benefits, which was health and happiness, which, by the way, the original meaning of the word wealth comes from the English root welle, which means happiness, state of good fortune, and welfare. And I really think that those three things work synergistically together.
That's interesting because we're taught, while we're not taught finance in school, we're taught that money can't buy happiness. And I don't know that it can, although it certainly can make things easier. I know a lot of people with a lot of money who are unhappy humans and have known plenty of people with far less wealth who are joyful in lots of different ways. So I don't know that it's a linear equation, but you're absolutely right that having wealth is a word that can not only mean financial wealth, but it also means things like being a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of experience. It just means that there's abundance, right? I mean, that is a part of the way you define that, no?
Yes, and yes.
So, I mean, you did this largely, almost entirely by yourself. You got out of this horrific debt situation. And you started building wealth, and you started building wealth at least in part by teaching people how to do it themselves. And now you're a financial coach, but you're not just, lots of people call themselves financial coaches. You're actually accredited. And so let's talk a little bit about that, because being an accredited financial counselor and being a member of the Association for Financial Planning and Counseling Education does really set you apart. That is a credential that most folks who call themselves coaches, I don't think have.
Yeah, I think it does. And thank you for bringing that up, Eric. You know, I became an accredited financial counselor in 2015 after many years of teaching personal finance and feeling like I was alone and just wondering, like, where are my people? Where are my people who also agree that this is really important? And somehow I stumbled across the AFCPE. And when I looked into what they were doing and their affiliation with NEFI, the National Endowment for Financial Education, and at the time the CFPB wasn't around, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, but they are now. And the AFCPE is very much a liaison between those organizations, but they also work in academia. And so they're, you know, boots on the ground, right, involved in all of the studies that are going on that are tracking what people are actually dealing with when it comes to their personal finances. And it's real. Like, the struggle is real. And it all starts with education and empowerment, which is why I love your book so much. And I love this podcast so much, because you're really helping people understand, like, you can get wherever you want to get financially. It's just a matter of knowing how to do it and taking the right steps at the right time and having income. You don't have to make a lot of money to become personally wealthy. You just have to make some money and put some money to its highest and best use every month, or at least on a consistent basis. So I love the AFCPE for that. Yes, being an accredited financial counselor is the highest certification that you can get, for financial counseling. And I really consider myself a coach, but I also have the counseling background. And, I think the difference between a counselor and a coach is as a coach, I'm really helping people discover the truth that is within them, discover, and realize the potential that is within them, like all of the answers are within us. Counseling is a little bit more like hands-on, telling people what they need to do. So they're both really good. They both have their benefit. But to me, coaching, I was a high school volleyball coach for 14 years, played competitive volleyball for 23 years. So it's something that I feel like I was born to do.
Well, you clearly have found your niche, and the public is absolutely benefiting from your, I'll use the term, wealth of knowledge and the simplicity that you bring to the table to try and help people figure this out. There's a lot about wealth that is baggage from when we're young people. There's also, I think, the trajectory to building wealth has as much to do with behavior and mindset as anything else. And you said that there's definitely a mindset involved. How does someone who is maybe not from that kind of background, not from a background where money's talked about at home, not from a background where maybe they've seen a lot of success, financial success anyway, in their families, how do you take somebody who really wants to get there and is trying to find not just the resources, but the mindset, how to learn the behaviors?
To me, it's all about getting into community. Like finding your people is really powerful because you are who you spend time with. And that was one of the first exercises that I did when I really wanted to take my life to the next level, is take inventory of, who is on my team and who truly wants success for me, and where can I expand my knowledge? Like my first company was, it was kind of like, I felt like it was lovely and it was great. And I was teaching personal finance alongside my full-time jobs. But a point realized, okay, if I want to be a full-time financial coach and I want to create the kind of income that I need to live the lifestyle that I want, now that's going to be different than like what you're aspiring to. That's going to be different than what, my clients are aspiring to. Like we all have different core values that drive us and motivate us. But I decided that I was going to put myself in a whole new swimming pool, like I was in a, just like a small kind of local community. And then I hired a business coach who exposed me to like a global stage and, global entrepreneurs. And, I got to speak alongside Calvin Klein and 50 Cent and Mel Gibson and Christy Brinkley and Bethany Frankel. And my first speaking event, I was in front of 1,500 entrepreneurs from all over the world, just like learning from, people who are doing things differently. And that experience really expanded my mind. And I realized, gosh, like there is no ceiling to how much money I can earn and to all of the different businesses that I can start. And that was really exciting to me. And so, from that experience, today I have 11 streams of income, and I believe in having multiple income streams in your personal life if you've got the energy for that. Like some people just want to go home at night and put their feet up. That is perfectly fine. There are lots of ways to create residual income within that. But I also like the idea of creating multiple income streams in my business. And so, all of these are things that I didn't come up with on my own. I learned it, that year that I spent learning everything I could about money after, I realized that my financial advisor wasn't the right financial advisor to help me get the results that I wanted. I broadened my, my circle. And so I think that that's probably the most powerful thing that someone who comes from a family that's not talking about money, that's not like supporting them into wealth is, get outside of your comfort zone and go find someone who's doing what you want to do and go learn from them.
So as an accredited financial counselor, you've distinguished yourself amongst what is a growing pool of folks who at least refer to themselves as financial coaches or different kinds of coaches. The financial advisory world is fraught with designation. It's full of designations and different kinds of backgrounds, and people typically called themselves financial advisors if they said they did. And you mentioned that your financial advisor solution was how much money do you want to invest, and I'm sure that led to your breakup with that advisor. But it's very difficult for consumers to know the difference between a financial advisor who is going to be not only a fiduciary by law, but also a good steward for them, versus someone who maybe has their own agenda. And how can a consumer tell the difference? Is there a bellwether? Is there a way to know, or is it consumer beware?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. Really two things. And the first thing that comes to mind is use your intuition. Really tap in and tune into, how are you feeling in conversation when you're interviewing financial advisors? Yeah, definitely look into what are their certifications. Are they a certified financial planner? Do they have another designation? Do your research and pay attention to how you're feeling in conversation with them and what they're telling they're going to do for you related to your money. That's number one. And there are good realtors and there are bad realtors. There are good doctors and there are bad doctors. Like, you can find wonderful people in every single industry. And so it is up to us to make the best decision for ourselves. And the other thing that I will note, and this is really the reason that I have pursued the path that I've pursued, is because I believe that financial advisors and financial coaches both have their time and place, and they're both very, very valuable. Like, I have a financial advisor to manage my liquid assets, and I love that because, they're in the market, like, following what's happening every day. That's not interesting to me. But the difference, and this is the way I describe it, when people say, oh, financial coaching, I didn't know that was a thing. I say, okay, well, a financial advisor is the person who helps you invest money that you already have. And a financial coach, like me, is a person who helps you create the money to invest. And that's a very simplistic way to look at it. But like I said, I think they're both very valuable. And, financial advisors, just to help you with the tax stuff and all the complexities, is powerful. But, how do you get to the point where you've got money to invest? That's a whole nother ballgame.
So there's a growing industry of financial therapists, which, I guess you can be a therapist of almost anything because people have different kinds of traumas or baggage or difficulties at different times in their lives, or they just want someone to talk to. What's the difference between coaching and therapy in your estimation in this space?
Oh, goodness. Huge difference. And I think financial therapists also provide a lot of value. But, therapy is a completely different field than counseling and coaching. Therapy is about kind of like going back in life and recrafting the stories that we have told about ourselves that led us to create conclusions about ourselves. For example, we don't have enough, so I'm not worthy of having enough, or this need wasn't met, and so I'm going to have a life where my needs aren't going to be met. Those are all stories. And I think a financial therapist can help us unlock those stories and recraft our stories so that we can get different results in our life. So, a financial therapist might be helping someone with trauma or limited beliefs. And to some extent, as a coach, I'm also helping people uncover their belief systems and their patterns and that kind of thing. But I would say a financial therapist is doing much deeper kind of look back work so that you can, clean your slate and move forward in a positive direction.
In your coaching and teaching experience, I'm certain you've run into some of those amazing aha epiphany moments for either your students or attendees or your clients or what have you. Can you think off the top of your head of maybe a story of an aha where a light bulb just went off and it changed someone's trajectory, without divulging too many details about them specifically, but Is there an aha or an epiphany moment that you can think of off the top of your head that was like that perfect golf shot that keeps people playing because, it's that one that says, okay, I can do this? But do you have one?
Oh my gosh, I have so many. I feel like every day is an aha moment in my clients' lives, and it's so fun. Like what I do, I feel like is such a gift and a blessing because literally once people learn, this is a great example of it. Like I can take $100 or $200 a month consistently and, throw it at my debt, for example, and I'll be debt free in a year or 2 years. And it's like, and then, then after that, I just keep taking that same amount of money and, I can build what I call your lighthouse fund, which is your 6 months of essential expenses. And I think that that's the thing is like when people realize that it's not difficult, it's not. It is, wealth building is so simple. It's just a matter of being aware. Like awareness is the first place to start. And once you start to understand like, okay, if I understand what I have coming in and what I have going out every month and I'm willing to track it and I apply my dollars to their highest and best use in a certain order, which, and I know that we're aligned in this, Eric, because I've read your book, is, eliminate debt, save, and then create the residual income, then, I can have more freedom and choices in my life instead of in 10 years, in 2 years. And then what that does is it helps people ascend Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I mean, that's what this is really all about is like, when you're living in debt, and I know because I have been there, I mean, it was painful, being paycheck to paycheck, being married to my job, being dependent on, having to do something that I didn't love to do so that I could pay my bills. If you're in that place, then, we're living at the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like after food, water, shelter, we get into like security and job security and financial security is at the bottom. But once you start to realize like, oh man, in just like a year or two, I'm not going to have to make these huge payments anymore. I'm going to have money in the bank. So maybe I can move into a better living situation or, I can get that car for my kids so that I'm not, driving them around all day, every day. Or, I can like take some time off so that I can, get a certificate so that I can increase my income. Like there's so many things that open up for us when we create that space. And it doesn't take, like I said, a lot of money. It takes just a little bit of money put to its best use to get to that point where, then we're starting to think about like, how can I boost my self-esteem? How can I have deeper and more meaningful relationships? And then we get to the top of Maslow's hierarchy and it's all about realizing our potential. Like, what did I come to this world to do? Like, why was I born? What's the meaning of my life? And that's really why I show up every day for my clients, because that's what I've created in my life when I really allowed myself to dream and get super connected to what it was that I valued. Everything else is about working backwards, and the money stuff just falls into place.
So I want to tease you for a second, Holly, because I feel I can. We've known each other long enough now I can. And that is that you have 11 income streams because I guess 10 was not enough and 12 felt like too many. What's next for you? Do I dare ask, what is the next big mountain to climb? I know you're a hiker and a climber and all of that. What's your next big thing, if you can share it with us, if it's not a trade secret of some kind?
Yeah, what a lovely question. Thank you for asking that, Eric. Yeah, sometimes my clients will ask me, why are you working so hard? If you're financially independent, millionaire, blah, 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 why are you, in COVID time sitting behind a computer 8 hours a day? And it is because, yes, I love it. And it is so enjoyable for me to help people make those transformations in their lives. But the more money that I can make with my company and the different income streams that I build into my work, the more money that I have to build a healing retreat center on some land that I own just east of Boulder. So that's my ultimate dream. I want to live with the animals in the gardens and, invite people in to do their healing work, because it's not just money. Like I always say, if you made it through childhood, you've got some bruises, like life is rough, and we can all live in harmony and enjoy our lives. And it's just a matter of like really, healing ourselves, and that takes, guidance and leadership. I've done it myself in my own life, and the biggest takeaway I have from, overcoming my own chronic illness, because I was, sick off and on for 17 years of my adult life, is that when I got into groups and started doing healing work within groups, going to retreats and doing psychotherapy and meditation and, chanting and all the, crazy things that are out there for healing, it works. It worked. And so I want to pass that on to others, and, creating a better world is what drives me the most.
Holly, this has been so much fun. I'm so glad to reconnect with you. I'm so glad to share you with our audience. And I know you're not a secret, because you're having so much success in your career and with your books and courses. But I just didn't want to keep you a secret from our audience, because this has been just awesome. I need an extra credit assignment from you, and I think you've given us about 27 to choose from. But if there was one thing folks could do right now, having spent a half an hour with you, whether it's to further their own financial independence journey, or to get their own mindset shifted, or whatever you'd like it to be, what would the one extra credit assignment be today?
I'm going to say it's just the basic thing of narrowing down what are your 3 core values. What is really important to you in life? For me, my 3 core values are love, freedom, and authenticity. But for others, it could be loyalty, hard work, the planet, animals, family, transparency, health. There's so many different values, and that's what makes the world such a fun place is, if we all get crystal clear on what it is that we value, then we can start to visualize the kind of life that we want to have. And when you start visualizing the kind of life that you want to have, you can make your money match that. And that's been super key for me. And that's one of the first places that I help my clients start on their own wealth journey is really seeing where it is that you want to go. And then, like everything else, we just work backwards so that, your external reality starts to match that internal yearning.
Great assignment, sage advice, and I'm not surprised to hear that authenticity is one of your core values, because I know very few people as authentic as you. Holly, thank you for joining us on Don't Retire, Graduate. You've been an amazing guest. This has been such fun.
Thanks, Eric. What a pleasure. Thank you.
So before we part ways today, Holly, how can people learn more about you, about your courses, buy a copy of Simple Wealth? What's the best place to get information about you?
2 ways, Eric. You can go to my website, financialimpact.com, and you can find me on Instagram at Holly Morph, HOLLYMORPH.
Very good. I hope folks who are listening to the show will check out your website and your book. It's been awesome. And I thank all of you for listening again today. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Please also check out our books, workbooks, and online financial literacy resources at brotmanmedia.com. We'll be back next week with another installment of Office Hours, and in 2 weeks with another engaging guest. For now, this is your host, Eric Brotman, reminding you, don't retire, graduate.
From this day forward, let us begin changing the way we view retirement. Today, I implore you, don't retire, graduate. Visit our website at brotmanmedia.com to subscribe. And please like us and post comments on social media. Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC, Kestra IS, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC, Kestra AS, an affiliate of Kestra IS. Kestra IS or Kestra AS are not affiliated with Brotman Financial or any other entity discussed.